Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month we are changing themes to remembering our lessons, which can mean many different things when we're undergoing change. This month in the United States, notably July 4th is, uh, you know, 4th of July Independence. We're celebrating the passage of the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and July 4th. But what people don't really know is a year before, the Continental Congress actually extended an olive branch petition that was rejected, and which kind of that decision ultimately led us to the United States we are today. In addition, this month Apollo 11 also landed in 1969. They started their liftoff from Kennedy Space Center, and one thing that's near and dear for me, close to home, is I'm half South Korean, so in the war. On June 25th, it marks 74 years since the Korean War. But in July 27th was also when they actually signed the armistice that actually stopped the ceasefire during between North and South Korea. I say all this because all this is remembering our lessons, but then it's about us, and a lot of times undergo change whether we like it or not. Change can also bring lessons that may have helped us along the way. And I have a new guest. His name is Jimmy Spikes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to it.
No problem. And I always start off with a disclaimer for those in the States. I don't reinvent the wheel, but working in the mental health field, I do encourage whatever groups, whether you go out with you know whether you just go with a social group or if you're going to church or whatever platform, if you could ask these three things, these three words, and if you're really struggling, I need help, especially for those around you, I do encourage you to seek help. But not in, like I said, in the States, but wherever you are around the world, I do encourage you to seek help if you need it. But if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and I always say things, people say it better than I do, Jimmy. So I'm going to give two kind of I don't talk kind of quote, one's a proverb, one's a Swedish proverb, and one's a quote from Steve Jobs to get us kind of talking about this idea of remembering our lessons. The Swedish proverb says, "Those who wish to sing always finds a song," and Steve Jobs says, "Your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life." What comes to mind when you hear those, I guess, lessons, and when you think about it in concepts of how we, I guess, adjust or adapt to change and whatever you want to share. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, I think they both, to an extent, really focus on the individual,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is extremely important. And especially when you're trying to learn something different, everybody has a way in their life of achieving a goal or anything they're trying to do different than anyone else. Even something as simple as running. People are faster because they can move one leg faster and different than you, maybe. I mean, there's so many things. I do like the one about Steve Jobs. I mean, he's an incredible entrepreneur who had an idea and went out there and challenged it and made a very successful company out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand and can relate to the difficulties of learning something especially something you're not familiar with.
Yeah, of
You got to
course.
you got to find your own way.
Yeah, and one of those, sometimes that's the hardest lesson is to actually look at yourself in the mirror and ask why is it what you're doing, why, and when we think about and when we're trying something new per se, especially when we think about remembering our lessons, the most uh, potent ones are the ones that made us feel very uncomfortable. Challenged our boundaries of what we felt we were able or what we feel comfortable doing. But we can learn the most from those instances. Anything you want to add, or anything you want to from what I said, or anything else you want to share?
Well, there's a lot to it. I mean, you got to enjoy the opportunity to the challenge of learning, and you hit on a key point: the uncomfortableness of it. I'm from Arkansas. I packed up my stuff and I moved to an island in the Caribbean. I
Hmm.
didn't know anybody, and I didn't speak the language.
Hmm.
I landed here, rented a car, and started driving around thinking, well, if I like it, if I don't, then I'm going to go somewhere else. You
Hmm.
know, it didn't take courage, so to speak, to do that, but it took something in my gut that made me do it. And a lot of that has to do with my faith.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you know, I do enjoy that. So
There's something about having a healthy tension. There's always going to be some sort of pushback, but when it comes to, like, I guess that intrinsic, that internal value, like, courage, someone once told me, is being being courageous 5 more minutes than anyone else. That's what courage is. Because a lot of times we when we think about ourselves, you went down to, is it Puerto Rico that you said you went down to Puerto Rico, or
yes,
you, yeah, and you didn't know anyone, and people were like, why would you go there? It's not, you may not be comfortable, but sometimes when we're making those big steps, it's about really what we see, not what everyone else sees. And like Steve Jobs said earlier, if we're kind of dictated or worried about what other people say, we tend to get stuck. I think Jim Carrey said it this way recently. I listened to his quote. He said, if you're worried, if you can't downgrade your life for 1 year, then you care too much what other people think. Sometimes, there's an adjustment period and all that stuff. So I do appreciate the contact, but when you're mentioning just some of the steps, and we're going to get to a little bit more about what you're doing in regards to. I'm going to give you a moment later on to share a little bit more about you, so that people who are listening understand where you come from. But I want to also just say about context. Last month was Post Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month. And a lot of times I think courage and bravery gets mixed up, in the sense of, if I'm in the States and I'm struggling, and I have a family, this quote really hits me hard. If you want to show me that you really love me, don't say that you want to die for me. Instead, say alive for me. It's the idea that a lot of times there's different contexts of what is important, I guess, a lesson in the context that's surrounding you. When you see this quote, anything that comes to mind when you think about, lessons and moving forward in that regard?
well, I mean, it, it's 100%. I mean, if somebody's struggling and they're
Mm,
actually struggling to stay alive
mm,
mentally, whether it be from a mental challenge or a physical
mm.
challenge, the fight to do that is far greater than giving up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically the way that I've always perceived it, so to speak. And I might have a little bit of a different opinion on some of that stuff. You know, I mean, I have lost friends and had friends that lost children to suicide.
Hmm.
And it's a horrible thing. And a lot of it has to do with communication.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they feel like nobody's there to help them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, it can be a different thing. And it's a real bad scenario for somebody to just give up on life to the point to where they don't feel important.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a disconnect that, society as a whole can work on. But I think realistically nowadays, and this is the honest truth for me, is with technology, we've become less dependent on physical interactions and physical interactions as far as anything. So
Mm.
you just become a zombie to the basically, whatever you're doing, whether it be TikTok or whatever, and you're
Mm.
not engaging with people. So I think there's a big disconnect in society,
Yeah.
unfortunately, based off of social media.
Yeah. I totally agree with, it's not per se. When I put this up here, obviously those who've passed away, who completed suicide, the ones who are survivors, who are there with the missing piece. I do, Korea. I mentioned Korea before. Korea is number one in the whole world with suicide. The suicide rate is the highest in the whole world. And then one thing that you mentioned communication. I do feel there's a lack of that. We have so many ways to communicate, but no real tangible, no real connection where we feel that that we're enough. You mentioned, there's a disconnect, and I do appreciate you mentioning those things. I had a guest recently come on, and he said, I used to just call my friends and just say, "Hey, I appreciate you for yada yada yada," and like we assume that, oh, even though they're good at, let's say, guitar, or they're good at whatever they're doing, the assumption is that they know that. But nowadays, it's not so sure. So I do encourage those, whatever circles, whatever family, friends you have, try to connect. The life of the party, Robin Williams, check up on them. How are you doing? Those kind of things. I do feel, just to pause, obviously we're talking about many aspects when it comes to lessons, but unfortunately some of the lessons that haunt us are the ones that we cannot resolve because they're no longer here. When we talk about suicide, those people who have made that choice, but like I said, it's not easy, just like you said. Henry Ford says, switching gears, Henry Ford says it this way, and I do feel that it kind of goes with part of the reason we get motivated. We don't get motivated because someone tells me, because I'm part of the plan. I get motivated about doing whatever I'm doing because I'm part of the driving force to what I'm doing. So he says, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. That's what Henry Ford says. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
There's a word that I just can't stand, and it's try.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody says, "Well, I'm going to try to do that," well,
Mm-hmm.
you either do it or you don't.
Yeah.
Try is a thought. That's all it is. If you're not going to, if I ask you to do something, you'll say, "I tried to do it." Just don't even mention it.
Mm-hmm.
Just say, "Hey, Jimmy, I'm not going to do that," or "Hey, I'm going to do that." Just don't try. Quit trying. You got to get out there and take it. Either take the chance or don't. But just sitting around, because people can actually get up in their head about that. Well, I tried to do it. Well, and then you start feeling bad about it. Well,
Mm-hmm.
either do it or don't. You're going to learn a lesson one way or the other. And if you don't have enough, I don't like using the word courage, but just enough self confidence, maybe, or anything to get out there and do it. It's not going to literally kill you. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to put yourself in a situation that's going to harm you.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't try to do anything. If you do it, you did it. You didn't
Yeah.
try to do it.
Yeah. And I do feel that yeah, the word courage is overused, but I also would say that if we just have value for ourselves, sometimes how we take care of ourselves may just seem more attuned to when we're talking about how we navigate. And the idea of just trying, we get in our heads, we end up just wanting change without change ever happening. So it's in our heads like, I want to change, I want things to get better, but nothing changes, so nothing changes. It kind of it go that circular thing. But we're it's also, when we think about some of the difficult parts, when we think about the big steps or the little steps, because I do think it's the little steps that do matter in the beginning. It's like getting up in the morning, deciding to do XYZ, building habits that are positive. For me, it's also reflecting, journaling, making sure I put boundaries when I come out of work. I deal with a lot of things when I go to work, come back. I want to have that effective communication with my wife. I want to be able to be intentional with my friends. So, whatever it is, what's important to me, those things are things I don't try, just do them. If they don't work out, if I learn from them, I learn those lessons, I make adjustments. The fact of the matter, we're human beings. Am I allowed to get better? A lot of times it's such a weird question to ask, but especially in as ambiguous as mental health can be, or any other area, it's the question sometimes get is, are you allowed to get better? Do you want to get better? Are you allowed to have that avenue? I think there's a Guyanese proverb says, hunger is felt by a slave, hunger is felt by a king. The thing is, there's a human quality that we all struggle with, even no matter how important, or how important you may seem online, or how important you want people to feel you are. We still have the same basic needs. We need that connective, that community. We need to have that ability to connect with others. Unfortunately, we could be doing well, but if I don't feel like I'm doing well for myself, everyone to think I'm doing well, I can also feel like I'm doing worse. So when you think about this and what we've been talking about, anything I missed or anything you want to add, what comes to mind?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty good proverb there again, too. We all suffer from the same sicknesses, some worse than others.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about it from a perspective of remembering your lessons, I mean, every to the same thing. When you get up, everybody learned how to tie their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Some learn faster, some learn slower. We
Mm-hmm.
all we all face the same difficulties, but we can all help each other by remembering our lessons and how we do it, and then passing those lessons on to other people and let them learn from our mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a kind of a key to it too, in my mind. I mean, hunger is kind of a strong, it encompasses so much when you say it that way, because a king could be greedy and he wants more money,
Mm-hmm.
but the slave could even want a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
It's still the same fascination with the same thing, or not, maybe not fascination, but desire
Yeah.
to achieve.
Yeah, and it's interesting because communities like churches. I've been leader in church, or communities like the AA or NA meetings, and a lot of times, what I find sometimes happens is, um, we forget that we were. Let's say if I was in NA, or know people who have, forget the time when I hit bottom, or at that point. So if someone comes in and makes a mistake, we're less forgiving. We're actually kind of really hard on the individual for making the mistakes, and we forget to reflect on our own self, so we don't have that kindness or humility that may have got us over that bridge, over that hump to where we're at today. Instead, we're like, oh, I made it 15 years sobriety. Let's just say I made it 15 years sobriety. This person should know better, but they forget their own lessons that they learned when they first started. Same thing in churches. Sometimes people been there for a while. They forget how it is. The church environment's a great environment to just um, have this illustration. Someone could be, and I mentioned this before, but someone could have beaten cancer, and they're like, "Amen." Someone beat cancer, right? We'll have that.
Mhm.
But as a leader, I'm also recognizing there's another family member who lost a family member from cancer. It's a complicated situation, and that a lot of times, if there's no one's sharing the same kind of connection or the intentionality, people can feel hurt. People are complicated. It's not simple when we think about how we treat one another, how we treat our needs, and how we treat our community, because they are important. At least from the lessons I've learned, no one, we're not, the old saying, we're not an island, but it's more that there is that need, just like the slave has a need. You can have all this stuff, all these things around you, but if no one really connects, no one cares about you, it's going to be kind of heavy in that regard. That's another way I see that too. um, CS Lewis, I just, I know we're getting to, I want to get to you, but how about this? Since we did a lot of this, I want to go and ask, let's talk about a little bit about what you've been doing. Give you a little bit of time to kind of share. For those who don't know, obviously you're new to this podcast, so you could give, the floor is yours, just to share and to give a context of what you're doing, what you're all about, and what you may want to share to those listening today.
Well, my name is Jimmy Spikes. I'm from Arkansas. I'm a Navy veteran, uh, friend of Bill W. There's a lot of things that go along with certain things. I'm a member of a church here that's in Spanish, me español, no bueno. So it's a learning experience, but I enjoy that today. I can sit in the church and I can sit there and understand. I can understand Spanish pretty good, but in Puerto Rico, they speak very fast. So sometimes it's like, hey, can you tone it down just a little bit? But, they make fun of me. But it's doing things these days that allow me to do things the way that I do things that I enjoy the most. I have a second lease on life. I get to enjoy things from a different perspective. Whereas if I was stuck in Arkansas, I feel like I would have sold myself short because I know everything that goes on there. Fast forward, a couple of years past that, my mom passed away, and I was at a point in my life prior to her passing away. She was sick, And I was like, I've got to go. I'm tired of being here. I need to change. I told my family when mom gets well, I'm gonna go. And so I moved to Puerto Rico.
Mm,
I didn't know I was going to end up here. I just flew down here. A friend of mine suggested it, fell in love, bought a house. Rest is
mm,
history.
mm,
A couple years down the road, COVID hit.
mm,
So I'm like everybody else in the world, and especially here, we were locked down. So I
mm,
decided, in my ultimate knowledge of everything, that I was going to go to the beach, even though you couldn't.
mhm,
So I went down to the beach and I was sitting there and just contemplating life, looking for an answer, not knowing where to go, and started looking for inspiration. My mom was a very big inspiration in my life. And so I was like, well, I'll look through my phone, I'll find a video of her or something. And
mm,
that's when it hit me. I had one picture of my mom after 48 years or
mm,
45 years at that time. I'd lost all her digital assets, all her media, all her social media, everything that she had saved on any storage platform was gone because we no longer had access to it. Or when you assign it to those mediums, you'd lose it for all. And
mm,
that's where I came up with the company Beternal.
mm. So, well, could you tell us a little bit more about what your company does, what it offers for those who are listening, and if they want to learn more, it'll be in the notes for those listening. You'll be able to click and find out more about what you're doing. Do you mind sharing a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. Beternal is a memory preservation platform, basically. It is the way I set it up. So when you have all these pictures somewhere, whether if you assign it to social media, when you put it on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
TikTok, whatever, when you put it on there, they own the rights to it. So
Mm-hmm.
you lose the rights to that information that you put it on there. So if you delete it, if you put it on there and you delete it off your phone, it's no longer yours. They own it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big bad no-no, in my opinion, about your personal stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and with the other storage platforms, while it's a great idea to save everything that you do, and we do digitally these days, when you're gone, they get rid of it.
Mm.
There's no, you're saving all of this wealth of information, life lessons, anything you do, and you're putting it on here, whether it be a recipe for a cake, the cure for cancer, as you were talking about, or just a simple message telling somebody that you love them.
Mm.
You can save this to Beternal, and when the day comes where you're inevitably not here anymore, we will distribute links to everybody that you've assigned this information to, so
Mm-hmm.
they will have you for the rest of their life
Mm.
and for their future generations. This is something for us to pass down. If I have a better way of walking, why am I not? I'm saving it right now to Dropbox if I did,
Mm.
but when I'm gone, unless I give somebody access to my Dropbox account and they know which file my secret is, it's
Mm.
gone. You're not going to go through every file somebody has in their life to figure out what it is. And I'm not giving somebody access to everything that I've done. I'm
Mm-hmm.
assigning with Beternal, you're assigning all of this information to individual people, as well as private messages and videos and things like that you choose.
It just sounds like such a brilliant idea, especially dealing with a lot of there's the speed of the digital age. There's so much of saturation information, and I can imagine people listening right now be like, oh, I have it on Facebook, I have it on so and so, and they don't realize exactly what you're talking about, that if the person passes away, no one has access to it, it's gone. If it's not, you don't have a digital copy yourself. So I do feel there's a definitely a house fast. Things have come since first computers, first PCs in 1990s to 2000s, and how we are today. I think it's a wonderful thing you're doing, because a lot of, especially I, you know, dealing with the older community, there's a resistance to the internet understanding this stuff, and at the same time, they still have that basic need to have that stuff to share with their families. So I do commend you for this service. Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, and to put it back to the older people, at this point, we're going to lose 2 generations of information.
Yeah.
Because I can't honestly tell you, it's been over 20 years since I developed a film.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those 2 generations basically that have started Facebook and uploading to Facebook and saving on all these storage platforms, when they're gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
But to the title of the podcast, remembering your lessons. This is a perfect place for you to sit down and tell your life story.
Yeah.
To tell how you made it, to tell you how you succeeded, to tell them how you failed, to tell them how you feel, to do all of these things. That way they know and they can learn what you did and how you did it to become who you are. And that's going to help them in their life.
It's interesting. Before we were briefly talking about how it's last month was post-traumatic stress, and how those people who feel so isolated, especially nowadays, with all the advancements and all social media, people still don't feel like they have a genuine connection. And now, we're thinking about how fast and how hard it is to the idea of losing everything that you want to pass on, remembering our lessons. There's so many ways we could share those lessons to those people, but it's really unfortunate when it gets lost, like what you're describing, when you have, and it's kind of also, how you can say, it is concerning. We have so many ways to communicate, but we don't communicate effectively. We don't share the lessons. We just share what we want people to see. The kind of like we direct our lives for people. We make our own movies of ourselves, but it's never really real. It's just what we want people to see. And I do feel that, unfortunately, that appears to be going the wrong direction in that regard. But I want to, we talked about, the theme of this, remembering our lessons. I want to ask you, you mentioned, you shared, and I appreciate you sharing your story, and I'm sorry for your loss. And I also want to share, thank you for your service. I was in the Air Force, I was in the Air Force in 2000. So I just want to share, yes, I just want to say, I appreciate that, and I just want to ask you, what lessons do you think that you've seen work for you? Obviously, you took some time. You made an initiative to go somewhere that you didn't normally would think you ever go. Anything that you want to share, what you've seen in other people that you've seen help them in regards to working through some lessons, or anything you want to share?
Well, I mean, a lot of it just has to do with taking the chance to put yourself out there and to take one step different than what you're used to. I used to do personal training, and a lot of times I worked with elder people, and they would have a fall and they would be nervous to walk, and we would find out which foot they had was dominant. And inevitably, I would try to get them to use their non-dominant foot to take their first step, because it was the most uncomfortable thing they could do. And once they felt comfortable doing that, then that changed the whole parameter on them walking again. So, I mean, there's a lot of things in life that just the little lessons and chances that you can take will inevitably lead to the biggest outcomes. If you sit in a room with I forget what it's called, but a room with everybody that agrees with you all the time, you're not going to learn anything. And learning and accepting the struggles and the hardships that come along with life, and sharing them with people in order for them not to have to go. I mean, my adventure building this company from a non-technical founder aspect has been nothing but a trial. I mean, it's like fail, 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 gain, fail, 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 gain, fail, 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 gain. I mean, it's not just A to B, and
Yeah.
that's what I thought. You get online, you're like, I'm going to build this company.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's going to acquire me, and in 2 years, I'm going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. No,
No.
that's not how it works.
Mm, yeah.
Uh,
And just as we kind of wrap up, but you mentioned the process. It wasn't A through to B. It wasn't that easy, and I feel sometimes we get so stuck on the goal of what we want, and we don't actually embrace the process. We can learn a lot about the process and the consistency. So if someone was to say, "Oh, how can I do better at this?" Well, it takes like, let's say you people go to the gym. If you run like 10 miles one day and you don't do it the rest of the month, it doesn't do anything. The
yeah.
idea is the consistency, and the same thing is that's true with everything else. A lot of times when I'm working with clients, when I'm working in the mental health field, it's not so much me. I may talk with them and try to kind of see where the problem is with them, but the idea is that they're going to want to take the steps and make those consistent steps themselves. And I only see that really working well is when they're part of the whole process and when
Mhm.
they embrace the process itself. So like I mentioned this, and this will be my final thought, and I'll turn it to you, your final thoughts as we wrap up. If I was a if I was a basketball, I was into basketball in high school. I was getting scouted, and my whole goal was just to be NBA MVP, but everything else didn't matter. So like I'm working hard. It's nothing against the grind, but if everything was only about that and not embracing the process to that,
Mhm.
the chances are I may never get NBA MVP. And sometimes with that may be a heavy, because life happens. Families. Someone may get sick. Someone may unfortunately choose to end their lives with suicide during the track as you go into this achieve your basketball hopes. And the problem is eventually you may hate basketball because you never really enjoyed the process of getting there. It's all about getting to a certain destination. The destination is important to kind of direct you. However, the process, I feel, is also as equally as important as you go through each of those steps.
Well, and that's an awesome way to think about it. And it makes me think about this even more that's the one thing I tell people when they talk about things they can record on Beternal. And I said, your life.
Mm-hmm.
I've documented this entire journey. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to pass it down to my immediate family. They
Mm-hmm.
can do with it as they choose because some of it's not necessarily verbally the way that I would like for it to go about.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they'll understand, hey, Uncle Jimmy built a technology company and he didn't know anything about technology. This is how he did it.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's allowing us a time and a place where we record most of our lives anyway.
Yeah.
Why are we not saving that information? And then it's everything. I got up today. And who's to say you're not making one for yourself? That way
Yeah.
you can look back in 5 years and go, okay, 5 years ago on this day, I made this 30-minute video. What is this?
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy, I don't know where you're at today, but Bubba, you got to keep going. Da 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 da. Or, man, I can't believe I hit that mailbox with my car when whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Make yourself laugh. You got to learn. I don't. My memory's not that good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the good times, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember some of the bad times. But like you said, it's the process of how did I get from A to
Mm-hmm.
B and in between that would make my life better today.
Yeah. 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 And I just want to, when we think about um, sharing, just I keep thinking about what your company is doing and just how much, you know, s- you think about how much data there is, how much video space takes, how much it's hard to save all this. We're heading that direction, and I do impress on those who are listening, those who are watching to just consider, when you think about our videos, we kind of have this ambivalent idea that everything's safe. It's not. And at the same time, in the same time, a lot of times right now, it's um, we have that barrier when it comes to our ability to connect, even with all these ways. But at the same time, I feel peace of mind is always undervalued. Especially when we think about these kind of things. Well, I don't want to think about morbidly if I pass away, but at the same time, I also want to feel safe, that I know things are safe where they are. So I do appreciate you. I know I asked before, but any other final thoughts that you want to share as we wrap up? And I do appreciate you coming on, Jimmy, and sharing your insight.
Well, I'd like to offer anybody that's listening to this podcast 3 months of Beternal for free with a 1 year subscription. When you go into sign up, it'll ask for a promo code. You'll enter your information in, and you on the bottom of the sign up page, you'll send us a message asking for your promo code. Just put Revive, and we'll set you up with the promo code for your 3 months free.
Again, thank you so much, Jimmy, for coming on and just everything you do. Obviously it's one step. Sometimes the best thing we do on a bad day is just to get up, move, do what you can, little by little, little step by little step. I appreciate you. I want to say to also, remember to stay updated. Revive Ministry through various platforms. ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. This is leaving you with the last quote. I like this quote. Kind of goes with what we were sending at the end. Good advice is a French proverb. It says, "Good advice is often annoying. Bad advice never is."